All right, so welcome everybody. So welcome to our Southern California Real Estate Summit, charting the dynamic landscape. And I want to welcome you all for coming to today's Southern California Real Estate Summit. I'm Stephen Gordon, Chairman and CEO of Genesis Bank. Some of you may know me as, Genesis is new, so you may remember the name Opus Bank. Anybody remember the name Opus Bank? I was the founding chairman and CEO of Opus Bank. As one of only two diverse multiracial minority depository institutions out of 4,600 banks in the U.S., Genesis Bank considers our experiential events to be an invaluable way that we can support businesses and entrepreneurs within our community. We believe that storytelling is a powerful tool to connect, relate, teach, and inspire. Today we have some of the best, brightest, and most active participants in the Southern California commercial real estate industry with us, and I'm sure the conversation will be lively, informative, and maybe even controversial at times. If this goes as well as I'm hoping it goes today, it's not going to be all of us just simply speaking with you. Hopefully I lose total control of this panel. Hopefully they're all interacting with each other. We're not going to wait for Q&A until the end of the panel. If someone says something and you want to dig in and go deeper with them and ask questions and engage with them, feel free to do so. We have microphones that will move around the room to whomever wants to dive in. And let's see if we can have a really fun experience here today. The world of real estate is ever evolving, with multifamily and commercial real estate and 1031 exchange strategies at the forefront of this dynamic landscape. Our distinguished panel of experts is here to provide valuable insights and perspectives. Throughout our discussion, we encourage you to engage with our panelists, ask questions, gain a deeper understanding of their strategies and views. I'd like to also acknowledge some special guests who are here in the audience today. And hopefully they're actually here. Like Councilwoman Amy Pham West from City of Westminster. Are you here? No. She's in traffic. All right, I'm really excited about this and very proud of this next person. Dick Zyman, you all know Dick Zyman, right? Dick I've come to know through, we're fellow members of the National Board of the American Friends of the Israel Philharmonic, the AFIPO, and I've gotten to know Dick through the time that I've served on the board, and have a tremendous amount of respect for Dick. He's the founder and co-founder and chairman of Rexford Industries, a New York Stock Exchange listed company, one of Southern California's leading owners and operators of infill industrial real estate. And Dick was also founder, chairman, and CEO of New York Stock Exchange Arden Realty, which until its $5 billion merger with General Electric, the largest single real estate transaction in the history of Southern California, was the largest owner of office space in Southern California. Over the years, and he has a much longer bio than what I'm going to read here, but I think he's set a great example for a lot of us. I know that, and I never get into age, but what I have found through the philanthropic activities in our communities over the years is that the elders who really blazed the path for a lot of us have somewhat stepped back from the example that they set, and they're waiting for all the rest of us to step up and lead. And Dick has held many leadership positions in educational, cultural, and social service in Southern California. He served 6 years as chairman of the board of City of Hope National Medical Center and its Beckman Research Institute, is a member of the board of governors of Hebrew University of Jerusalem, is CEO and co-trustee of the Rosalind and Arthur Gilbert Foundation, a major Los Angeles-based charitable foundation organization, is the founding chairman of the Los Angeles Business Council and its institute. Among his major contributions, Dick has established and endowed the UCLA Zyman Center for Real Estate, the Zyman Family Oncology Outpatient Center at City of Hope, and the 96-bed special care Alzheimer's facility at the Jewish Home for the Aging. In addition to numerous awards and honors, Dick is the recipient of 3 honorary doctorates and the UCLA Gold Medal, the university's highest award, and Dick received his BA and JD degrees from University of Southern California. Dick, I'm really glad you're here. And I always say, with the longer the bio gets, it really means we're getting old. All right, so Yoni, are you here? Jonathan Wintner? Promised me he'd make it. He's in traffic. All right, he's president of Windstar Properties. Simon Lazar and Sam Mostadim from Helio, are you here?
Yeah.
Hey, tough. You guys are great, and my daughter is really happy.
They got some nice ink this morning, a real deal.
Okay. Michael Cerruti, Maxim Enterprises. Danny Cerruti of Horizon Investments. Are you guys here?
Yeah, they're about there.
Yes? Very tough negotiators. And I'm not paying $8 a foot. Right. Janet Neiman, Kidder Matthews, where are you? Janet, Broker of the Year in Los Angeles. Congratulations. Larry Wilkes, Related California Residential. Are you here somewhere? Welcome. And Kim Front from the AFIPO, the American Friends of the Israel Philharmonic Orchestra. Get to know her. Yeah, she's here. The work that we do at the AFIPO in terms of bringing Jewish classical music, world class, the IPO, the Israel Philharmonic, to be able to tour around the world, to be able to tour here in the United States is absolutely incredible. And down in Orange County, we just had Itzhak Perlman and had a spectacular evening and had 3,000 people in the community show up. And these are the magical things that we make happen. So get to know Kim Front if you get a moment. Am I allowed to do that at Hillcrest?
You're not asking.
I'm not asking
You're not
for
asking anybody for money, so
Right,
it's
good.
okay.
All right. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the co-host of today's event, the law firm of Greenberg, Glusker. For over 65 years, Greenberg, Glusker has delivered first-tier legal service to its clients. We're proud to have Skip Kessler, a partner and dear friend from Greenberg, Glusker. As a founding board member of Genesis Bank, I'm so glad that Skip and our close friend and colleague Michael Wiener from Greenberg, Glusker could join our panel. Michael, you're over there on the end here.
Yep.
Right. Skip, you want to take a second to tell the story, the fearful story of when I acquired Commerce Escrow and RPM?
So I think it was 2015 that a competitive, I don't want to mention any names, but a competitive escrow company and a competitive exchange accommodator were acquired by Opus Bank. And the 1031 accommodator was a very important source of client referrals. So I was, a little bit concerned about my future cash flow. And I had heard from the principals of Commerce and RPM, I guess I did mention their names, that this guy, Stephen Gordon, was the driving force, and he's chairman of Opus Bank. And I'm not the world's greatest marketer. I don't do a lot of marketing, but I picked up the phone and I called Stephen and I said, Stephen, my name is Skip Kessler, blah, 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 blah. I told him about my relationship with these two companies that he just bought. And I said, I'd like to meet you. I want to see if, the stream is going to continue. So I drive down to Irvine. And I've recently described it as a bromance. I mean, Stephen and I just hit it off. We have worked together for all those years doing things just like what we're doing now, but also with the bank helping our clients in more than just exchange and escrow needs. And when Stephen asked me to become a founding director of Genesis, I said, yeah, I'd love to. This time I get to represent borrowers, lenders rather, having represented borrowers for years and years and years. I get to sit on the other side of the table, and it's been exciting. So
And then
I'm glad to be here.
The lawyers at Greenberg Glusker made him develop a whole conflict of interest policy that he'd have to live by because he's on the board of the bank. And so anyway, but that's all worked well.
Yeah, no, we're very happy with the relationship.
And the bromance is still there,
And the
right?
bromance,
Right.
the bromance is still there.
And where's Joan? I know you get jealous of our relationship, but okay. All right, so Skip's been practicing law since June 73. As a partner of Greenberg Glusker, he represents institutions, large real estate portfolio owners, corporations, private businesses, and high net worth individuals in connection with tax structuring of complex real estate transactions, as well as the restructuring of partnerships, limited liability companies, and corporations that own large parcels of real estate. Sean Moghavem, president of Archway Equities. Sean has over 30 years of experience in commercial real estate acquisition, management, entitlement, and dispositions, as well as venture capital and private equity, and oversees the entire operations of Archway. Sean, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And dear friend, and I'm looking forward to our Shabbat dinner together.
Likewise, thank you.
Right. David Nagel, President and CEO of Decron Properties. David serves as President and Chief Executive Officer of Decron Properties Corporation. Under his leadership, Decron Properties grew from managing 10 buildings with a $200 million valuation in 1988 into a $4.5 billion enterprise with 54 real estate properties, including 50 multifamily apartment communities, not just buildings, but communities. The stunning growth makes Decron one of the largest and most respected privately owned real estate firms in California. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
Nadine Watt. Nadine brings 25 years of real estate expertise and an entrepreneurial drive to her position, where she oversees day-to-day activities and strategic planning for all commercial investment activities, including acquisitions, development, and asset management for the company's 35 million square foot portfolio. Welcome, Nadine. Michael Wiener, tax partner at Greenberg, Glusker. Michael focuses on structuring real estate and corporate transactions in a tax-efficient manner. Clients rely on his ability to analyze complicated tax issues and implement creative solutions. He's an expert in structuring all types of tax-deferred Section 31 exchange transactions, real estate dispositions by partnerships and limited liability companies, real estate acquisitions involving multiple purchases, or fresh cash investments. So now we're going to dig into the questions. So we're going to get into the exciting and depressing parts of the industry in a moment, but why don't we start out with, no pun intended, what's your genesis? Who are you? How'd you become you? Describe your professional journey from your starting point to where you are today, and let's not go all the way to birth. Why don't we start kind of with that professional part of everyone's careers and how you became the icons that you are today. Anyone?
All right, I'll begin. David Nagel, born and raised here in Los Angeles. I was raised in Hancock Park. Today I live on the west side here in Los Angeles. And being an Angelino, I always, focused on our local market. And kind of knew always coming out of college that I wanted to join my father and join the family business. And after I graduated NYU Stern Business School, that's exactly what I did. And first focused on the construction part of the business, being a superintendent, eventually a purchasing agent, then got involved in management, from management, asset management, got involved then in the finances of the business, and just grew to be a leader in a family business by actually doing everybody's job. The nicest thing about starting a business when you're in the business when you're young is you're willing to take on every job. And so that's what I did. And that's ultimately what allowed me to have the expertise to ultimately run a company such as ours, and the fact that I was willing to roll up my sleeves and take on any responsibility that was brought before me.
How has that evolved into your role today?
So the way it's evolved today is how do you manage 380 employees? How do you manage a portfolio that stretches from San Diego to Seattle and now is, traveling through the Sun Belt? So the answer is you really need to be an expert at so many different things to make sure that you provide that leadership, that wisdom, that vision to help people go from one spot to the other and govern that. And that expertise came through the hard work of learning the business from 21 to where I am today.
So you and I talked about this, and I don't want to get this wrong. I'm 61, you're 63. Your role is different now at 63 than it was when you were 33.
Yes.
we've all matured and evolved and learned from those experiences. Do you mentor more than you did back then? Are you in the weeds?
So the answer is a little bit of both. I'm laughing because there's several of my associates here in the audience.
What would they say?
They would say I'm in the weeds too much. But I know that I've definitely taken a step back. And what I've done is I've mentored and mentored so much of our senior leadership, and at the same time brought in new, fresh eyes into our senior leadership that were experts prior to them coming here, that I can let the ship sail without me. And the business runs and operates every day without my daily input. They know what they're doing. And I think the key to success in running a company is always about the fact that they can operate without you. There's a famous story in our family. My wife is here, so I'm going to tell that story. My father-in-law met a Passover. This story is 30 years old or 25 years old, and I'm at a Passover vacation with them in Florida. And every day we're at poolside, and everyone's relaxing, and I'm getting a FedEx every single day, and they're bringing it to me. And my father-in-law says to me, "You're very impressed with yourself, aren't you?" And I didn't even know how to answer that. And his answer to me is, "Well, I just want you to know I'm not impressed at all." When you can come on a vacation and you don't need a FedEx to arrive, that you need to open and read, and you can just travel and the business runs on its own, that's when I'll be impressed. And that speech has done. that speech really resonated with me and made me
You sound
realize.
like my wife.
It made me realize, and so my father was always a one-man show, and then I joined him, and then we were a two-headed horse, and that allowed us to do so many more things and grow and so forth. But what my father-in-law pointed out to me is, you need to grow your company, and your company is not about real estate. Your company is about the people that run the real estate. And I am very proud that this real estate runs without me.
You're here.
Yeah.
Was the here from the Nagel table? Okay.
I hope you're not going to ask me my age or talk about my age.
Go for it.
It's been interesting being with these gentlemen on the stage. When we did our pre-call, everyone had a Ray Watts story. And even when I walked up at the table, they said every Ray Watts story begins at 5:30 a.m. So you guys have a 3-hour reprieve. I am the third generation in a family of real estate developers. Unlike David, I had zero interest in joining the family business. I ran as far away from it as I could. I ran to the entertainment business. I have an undergraduate degree from Georgetown University, where I wanted to go into the Foreign Service and maybe eventually be an ambassador one day. I speak 3 or 4 languages. The year I graduated, they did not offer the Foreign Service exam that year for whatever reason, so I decided to apply to graduate school. I went to USC and got my master's in cinematic arts. And I'd been working for a company at Watt Plaza for a few years, and that company changed their business plan and decided to downsize or go bankrupt, whichever the two you prefer. And so my father said, well, while you're looking for another job, why don't you come back to the business? I'll give you an office. You can send out resumes. You can go on interviews. And even if one day you're Sherry Lansing running Paramount, you still need to know how this business works and that no one's cheating you. So I started in the company, again, doing every job from the ground up, from assistant project manager, learning how to do every job as David did. And I went on a 9-month interview at Paramount, which they never ended up hiring for the job. So as I was doing all these assistant jobs at Watt, I realized I needed more responsibility and I needed to sink my teeth into a project or something. So I said, okay, I'll stay here. I give you 2 years while I work on this project. And now I'm 25 years in. So that's what I call my Genesis story. It was like my father, Darth Vader, saying, "Come to the dark side." But in the end, I really did choose quality of life. And I got to go to all my daughter's soccer games. Her coach is here, Michael Cerruti. I got to go to all the plays, and I got to participate in a lot of school activities that if I, had stayed in the entertainment business might not have been my own. So in that respect, I love being in a family business and all the opportunities that afforded me.
Sean?
Well, my genesis very naturally emanates from my father. He started life, after losing his dad at the age of 3, had to start from nothing. And by the age of 40, he was able to become a major industrialist in Iran and make enough money to fly to America and to London in around 1974. And like in LA, bought the Harold Lloyd estate, the Green Acres, near the Beverly Hills Hotel, 16 acres of land plus a 40,000 square foot castle for almost nothing. And started his real estate career here, and very soon became friends with Nadine's grandfather, and did lots of large land entitlements, and did really all kinds of asset classes, industrial, residential, in retail, medical office, etc. I saw what really a steely resolve does, and learned from him. And when time came for me, I decided to sort of focus and specialize. So I focused mainly on medical office originally, and did some work in California and Arizona. And when the first QE1 happened and the money supply started to increase, we said, well, you know what? Probably inflation is about to arrive. So we decided to pivot to mainly multifamily, and started selling our medical office assets, and decided to move into the Sun Belt, where we thought the major sort of wage growth and employment growth was happening, and sort of continued our operations there until 2022, where we decided to then pivot back to California because of all the supply that was happening. But that was really my journey.
Do you still have the castle?
No. He subdivided it and sold 1 acre lots and sold the castle. Ron Burkle now lives in the castle.
Wow.
Added another unique property to his portfolio.
Yes.
Interesting.
Me?
You please.
Sure. Hi, Michael Wiener, everyone. I'm a tax partner at Greenberg, Glusker. So my genesis is really in this overall geographic area. I grew up down the block from Roxbury Park. I would say I spent my formative years at what is now the Nagel family campus of Eula High School. I did college and law school in New York. I worked as a corporate attorney at a big New York law firm, moved back to LA and worked in international tax at an accounting firm. And then one day, just randomly, I responded to an internet ad for a tax attorney job at an unnamed firm in Century City. And a few days later, I was sitting in the conference room in 1800 Avenue of the Stars with Joan and Skip. And since then, it has been a tremendous ride. We, get to work with, first of all, the amazing people on this panel, many of you in the audience. And we get to have just a lot of fun structuring different tax transactions, making them happen, seeing them through. We are by no means what I'll call hands-off tax attorneys, where you just come up with a plan and just let somebody else implement it. We see it through every inch of the way, and it's been, really just a, pleasure and a joy getting to work with Skip for, about 11 years now, and learning just how to be a creative tax planner while still, painting within the lines more or less, and adjusting the different changes in the tax code and how that affects the different business decisions.
Skip,
Yeah.
Let me,
125 years in the business.
let me add that when I saw Michael's resume, it turns out one of his references was somebody I knew very well, a woman who I had worked with professionally. She was very, very demanding. So I called her up and I said, Michael's applied for a job, and she had rave reviews about him, which was enough for me. So let's say it's worked out pretty well. So I'll tell you my sort of funny story. I mean, I was supposed to be a lawyer from the time I was born. My dad was one of 4 brothers, and the baby, the youngest brother, was the star of the family. And even though he was the youngest, he was really the patriarch. I mean, all of his brothers counseled him for his advice, and he was a lawyer. And it's an understatement to say that he had a strong influence on my life. My mother always told me, my dad was a car dealer, that I would not go into that business. Although when I was a teenager in the 60s and I worked for my dad, it was pretty exciting to be around all of that American iron, and those were some pretty cool cars that are collectibles today. But one of my favorite stories about why I became a lawyer, I think I was 16 or 17. There was a new FM classical music station that was starting in my hometown, and I applied for a job, and they offered me a job. I go home and I say to my mother, I have a job working for, I think it was called WBBF-FM, on Saturdays. And she looked at me and said, "You're not taking that job. You're going to become a lawyer." And that was that. In terms of my, in terms
He's
of
loved it every day since.
that's right.
He does
That's
have a
right. I would-
radio voice, though, doesn't
You
he?
know,
Yes, doesn't he? No, we say that all the time.
Yeah.
So I've always been skeptical about lawyers writing articles and in terms of what they do for their career. But in 1978, I wrote an article in the Journal of Taxation, which was, was and is one of the prominent legal journals for people in the tax area, about what was then the Starker case that was being appealed to the Ninth Circuit. And that really became the beginning of my career, and it's been very exciting. I mean, I always say that structuring deals is my golf game, and I want to play golf for as long as I can in terms of structuring those deals, and it's been a great run.
Okay, so let's paint a really exciting, optimistic picture. So a couple of years ago, we went from being 13 years into a 10-year cycle of interest rates being at 0. And the Fed started constructively pushing up rates at every single meeting. It started out with 25 basis point increases, working its way to 50 basis point increases. And then for the first time in my career, I saw 75 basis point increases. And we're now, let's call it 550 basis points higher than when we were at the beginning. And there's all sorts of assets that are structured with longer term financing down at 0. There's all sorts of expectations that buildings were bought at anticipating lease and rent increases. And and now there's talk about a Fed potentially cutting interest rates. I think people went into the beginning of 24 anticipating that might happen January 1st. I think that was insane. It's if we're lucky, we'll get it in the second half of 24, and the Fed is being incredibly stubborn about the idea of cutting interest rates too soon. And if they were to do so, unless there's some sort of cataclysmic event, which does periodically happen in the world, it'll be 25 basis point moves. There won't be, I wouldn't think, any strong aggressive rate moves. So then, if that wasn't enough, we had a bit of a slowdown last year while everyone was trying to figure out what does this all mean, and then numbers weren't penciling on certain deals. And then when we were done with that, then we moved into the beginning of 24, and in March, everything that industry had been pushing for, digital and social media, online and mobile, and easier regulation, resulted in, and concentration of some major influential clients and shareholders of financial institutions, resulted in roughly a 48-hour failure of Signature Bank, I'm going to leave somebody out, SVB, and
First Republic.
Right? And people suddenly started learning about things called FDIC insurance coverage. Everyone became an expert on that. Everybody started learning about the idea of, even though they've had a long, huge, amazing relationship with, let's say, First Republic Bank, maybe perhaps we should diversify our banking relationships, and everybody talking to everybody. And we had some very, very, very large bank failures. Now move that slightly forward, and this happened to JP Morgan years ago in the last cycle, when JP Morgan helped the government and took Bear Stearns and Washington Mutual and doing them a favor. And then all of a sudden the government started beating up on JP Morgan. And if you ask Jamie Dimon at that time, I remember going to a bank CEO conference with Jamie, and he had the microphone, and he was asked, if you got the phone call from the government to do this again, would you do it? And his answer was, I'm not taking that phone call. Right? So then, now fast forward, New York Community, one of the largest multifamily lenders in the entire country, who acquired Flagstar, who then also helped the government and acquired Signature, went over $100 billion in assets. And then all of a sudden they announced in their year-end earnings, when they announced them in January, I think it was, huge loan loss provisions, much higher than anticipated. A few assets that were not having any type of rental increase, whose valuations were dropping significantly. And that rent control, which was always a phenomenal part of their story, and why they had less issues than any other bank in the country as it related to multifamily, because of the concentration of rent control in the New York 5 boroughs, et cetera. Suddenly their stock dropped by 60%, 70% on the news of maybe even they might have issues as we head into whatever this cycle is going to be. And all of that, by the way, that good news that I just kind of painted, is without hitting a credit cycle. We've not hit a credit cycle yet, per se. So have the anticipated buying opportunities due to distress in the market started to materialize yet? And how are you positioning yourself to take advantage of them? And are you buying or selling in today's challenging real estate market?
I'll be happy to answer that. To begin with, I think the opportunities are in the eye of the beholder, in a sense. I think they have started to show themselves. We bought a good amount of property last year, and I think it was an amazing time to buy, because all the institutions were pencils down, and so was private capital. So really, whoever had to sell, there weren't that many buyers out there, and you could name your price, basically. So we had two amazing buys, one in the Inland Empire and another in San Jose. And just as an example, the one in San Jose was a national developer who built these apartments for about $110 million in 2019. And it was the end of their life. Fund Life had to sell at market prices. It was in San Jose. There was really nobody there. They mispriced it a bit. They brought it to higher than they should have originally. So a lot of interest had already gone away. We stuck to our price, and we were able to get it for $74 million. So $30 million discount to the construction price in 2019. So we felt very good about that, and we feel very strongly about the prospects of San Jose coming back with the advent of AI, and really all the major headquarters are there. And interestingly enough, just before we closed, both Zoom and Adobe, who are 5 minutes away from our property in downtown San Jose, declared that they want their employees to come back to the office at least 2 days a week. So, which means all the people who went to Austin, Montana, Idaho have to come back if they want to be there 2 days a week. So there's a good momentum there. So I believe, yes, there are good opportunities out there, but it'll be even better. The issue is that when those amazing opportunities do come about, there's a ton of dry powder that will be pouncing on those. So we didn't have much competition. There will be some competition when that happens.
You're really fortunate. I haven't seen any of those great deals.
We had to be.
We have some dry powder. We're looking. I'm very mission driven. I like workforce and affordable housing. So we've invested in a couple deals with partners on some more mission affordable housing. We did, unfortunately, a few years ago, a deal in Oakland. And it's cross-collateralized with San Fernando Valley. So the San Fernando Valley was excelling, and Oakland went into the tank. When In-N-Out and Denny's need to close in Oakland, you know you have some issues with your affordable housing. So we haven't been as fortunate to find great deals at the moment, but I think there'll be some coming. And I do agree that there will be a lot of competition for them.
We were in an exchange, so it's there's more of an impetus to try and win deals and be out there, and that's why I think it came to us.
So I'll just add, I agree that there's deals out there to buy, but they're few and far between, and they're hard to find. If you roll back and you think about where real estate values were, let's say we go pre-COVID, 2019, when we were looking at, our core asset class is multifamily apartments. And if we were looking at multifamily apartments to acquire, good quality real estate, well occupied, you were buying in the, 4.5 cap rates is probably where you were looking at for deals. You had positive leverage at that time, and you could make deals, track to give good cash on cash yields of 5 to 6% to your investors. Come COVID and stress in the financial world, and the way they handled that is dropping rates now to 0. What happened to cap rates? Cap rates went to 3 and 3.5, and we even saw deals go sub 3. Dick Simon's in this room. I bet he saw deals that were below 3 caps in the industrial world at that time. And where are we today? Today, with interest rates being as high as they are, with so many commercial banks challenged with their portfolios and with their balance sheets, today cap rates are in the 5s, right? 5, 5.25, 5.5, depending on the market that you're going in. So depending on where you're looking at and where if you're comparing it to 2021, 2022 peak pricing, or to 2019, today values are 20, 25, maybe as much as 30% below where they were. And we like that basis. We like that concept. We think that we are in a time where real estate is relatively cheap. The hard part is, how do you finance it? So just to kind of describe what Decron has done in the last 90 days or so. We saw a great opportunity in San Diego, mid-rise apartment building, brand new construction, finished in 2023. And just to compare it, it was it's in Mission Valley. It's next door to the Fashion Mall and the Town and Country Hotel, if you're all familiar with that. And the Lowe's ultimately sold the land, and the developer built 4 towers. The first 2 towers were delivered in 2022. They sold those 2 towers at an average price of approximately $650,000 a unit. We come in year later, we're buying it at $510 a unit. That's a steep discount. We'll take that discount of and thinking about how we're competing against our next door neighbor, our basis. We love that basis. The challenge in buying that deal and the challenge in buying other deals is the financing. Is notwithstanding that we are buying at an excellent cap rate that we like of 5.25, we're not financing it with positive leverage, and that's the challenge. And so what a investor needs to do is, if you like your basis, what you need to recognize is that your cash on cash yields for your first few years are going to be challenging. And I know you'll get into it later on and talk about how then do we structure the financing so that we can deal with these higher rates. And I'll talk about that when you're ready.
Well, we kind of like it because, as a bank, because we're more partners, you're having to come to the table with a lot more equity than you used to when we were down at 0, and you were going to 75% max LTV and trying to push it as hard as you could.
Correct.
Right?
At these high rates, right, you can't really finance more than 55%, maybe squeeze out 60. But that's about the max you can do in financing it, which
And then all of a
just
sudden
means you got to
everybody's
raise more
start-
equity. Yeah,
Right.
you're, again, affects your IRR, ultimately by you having to putting in more in, but it's a safer play, and that's fine with us.
And these are conversations we've all had. Sean, we've had these conversations. SP, where are you? We've had these conversations. If Yoni was here, did Yoni make it yet? No? All right, can you call him and see where he is? All right, but I mean, there are all these conversations going on everywhere about, for those who syndicate, as an example, all of a sudden having access to more equity when the traditional people they used to go to and partner with on every deal, maybe the amount that they put in before, they're putting in less now. Now all of a sudden they're excited about AI and NVIDIA and whatever. Right? And all of a sudden real estate looks a little boring in comparison, right? But all of a sudden having access to that equity becomes important when you're going to 50%, equity on deals versus being able to leverage everything.
But have you worked through the COVID hangover and all the people who weren't paying rent or gotten rid of done your evictions and cleaned up that whole cash flow issue?
So
where do you stand with the?
So that was a true operational mess in 2022 and 2023, but that is burning off. We are getting through it. Our delinquencies, which were double digit in properties that had a historical delinquency factor of 0.25%, and suddenly now we're sitting with 11 and 12 and 13%. That's come down. We're down. People know that eventually they are going to get evicted. We needed the eviction moratorium to lapse, and after a really long time, it finally has in all the markets that we're in. The toughest market of all was not LA. Our toughest market has been King County in the state of Washington. Yeah. That has been our biggest challenge. Yeah. We have a property in Kent, Washington, and it's an amazing, great property, but we are truly challenged there in dealing with those delinquencies and getting them out. But even there now, it is improving because the courts are finally now letting us get rid of the non-paying tenants who just know they're going to get away with it, which is the horrific part about the whole story.
So is that a combination of how liberal
Washington.
these parts of Seattle, I'm being careful.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's safe to say this in LA. I mean, I'm a Republican, I'm a capitalist, and I actually believe that it's possible to do economic good and social good all at the same time. And going back to the Jamie Dimon statement, you know, that I would probably cross the line and vote for Jamie Dimon if he ran for president, right? But you know, Seattle used to be an amazing city. It's not so great anymore, and the surrounding areas have been destroyed. Same thing goes for Portland, for that matter. And you know, drug infested. What's it now called? It's not homeless. It's unhoused. You know, and lack of law enforcement, and that impacts everything around. You know, from a residential, commercial, business, multifamily. Do you want to live there? Do you leave? You know, it's.
So our company's answer to that is we've stayed away from downtown, highly urbanized markets. We did it more because of supply concerns, but ultimately it has helped us in avoiding the high delinquencies are in those areas. So we're typically, our focus is on what we call first ring suburban market. So everywhere within an hour's commute of major job centers, that's where Decron Properties has their focus. And in those markets, the delinquency factor has been, I'll call it, a bit easier or a lot easier to live with, even in Seattle and other markets like that. But our most challenging counties for us has been King County in Washington and Alameda County up in Northern California. Those have been the two toughest.
You heard me say Oakland.
Correct.
So
Are the people who are not paying the rent unemployed and don't have the money, or are they just gaming the system? I have a
They're
feeling-
gaming the system,
I have a
and
feeling
they know
that-
it, and they are employed, and they're taking it to eventually the court date. Oh, now there's a court date. That's what we need. Once you have the court date, then they're skipping, and that's it. And chasing them is a waste of time.
And that's the
and we
interesting
get in, and then we get in a good renter. So it is improving, and we personally think that by the time we get to the end of 2024, even in those most difficult markets like King County and Alameda, we'll get those delinquencies down to the sub 3% range. But all our other markets, and we're in more than a dozen different counties, delinquencies today are below 3%. It's just you just have to grind through it. It's all about, in the end, leverage, right? It's all about being able to hold on and grind through the reduction in cash flow that you have to suffer being in these type of markets where legislation is anti-landlord and focused on the renters, who are ultimately the people who are putting them in office.
No.
Any other thoughts, comments?
Well, I mean, I guess this is getting maybe a little bit ahead of ourselves. I know we're going to talk about financing structures and everything later, but just remember always the tax consequences when you need to bring in, if you're not able to get a certain type of loan, if you're bringing in fresh cash, if you're in the middle of a 1031 exchange, there are issues that need to be navigated. And that, like I said, we'll get more into later, but that can potentially result in negative consequences. Even if you think you have a perfect 1031 exchange, no boot, you can still potentially have some gain. The only thing I would mention about last year, 2023, is that it was, really, Sean mentioned they were in exchanges, and it was a really weird coincidence or weird situation where, because there were storms in Los Angeles in January, they kept extending the tax return deadline. I know the CPAs in the room loved that. And they kept extending the 1031 exchange deadline. So you had people who had sold their downleg property in, potentially September or October of 2022, who had until, in the end, November of 2023 to complete their exchange. And normally, you have a 180-day cycle. Here, people have to spend their money within 180 days. Here you had, almost a year of capital just kind of sitting there. And in a lot of these cases, they also had until November 15th to identify their upleg properties. So you really had a lot of just exchange money sitting there.
We were busy the first 15, 16 days of October.
Oh, yeah.
Because everybody, procrastinated and wanted to get the best deal in the context of, rising interest rates.
Yep. And then they extended on October 15th. They wound up extending the deadline again until November 15th. So.
And I wanted to add an interesting point about blue states and red states, because we're mostly in the red states, and it was interesting to see that during the COVID period and even after, for a long time, the courts were very slow to process the evictions, and they were giving all kinds of extensions. Lasting 4 to 6 months even. So we thought, okay, you're talking about red states and landlord-friendly regulation or environment, and that was not the case. It was very interesting that it was, somewhat close to blue states with what was happening there.
I don't think that anyone who's ever done jury duty would find that surprising.
I think the pandemic created a larger class of people who are constantly claiming that they're overworked and understaffed. I think it's, every day somebody's, we're overworked and understaffed. And the courts, are prime examples of that.
So is this making multifamily less attractive, as attractive, picking and choosing your spots?
Good question. I think that it's always going to be an attractive asset class because there's a chronic shortage of housing in the country, even in those areas where you have, bubbles. Those bubbles will be absorbed in the next 18 months or so. And then you have government, government help in financing, government-sponsored financing through Fannie and Freddie that's not available to any other asset class. You have people marrying later, having more divorces, which again sort of requires more housing. You have higher interest rates, which doesn't allow people. You can't buy a house. So these are renters by necessity. So I think that is always a great asset class, but yes, there are always counterweighting forces that you have to contend with.
So I'm just thinking about, from a bank standpoint, we never really had to reserve much against multifamily loans. They were always considered the best performing asset class. And then the regulators would look at reserve levels against multifamily, and they would criticize how low the reserve levels were. And then we would point to the data on the FDIC and other regulators' websites showing that there were no delinquencies, no charge-offs. And when I think back to whether it was Commercial Capital Bank, we had no delinquencies, no charge-offs, and we were the second largest multifamily lender in California. Opus, we were the second largest lender on the West Coast on multifamily. We never had more than 50 basis points of reserves against multifamily and had no delinquencies, no charge-offs. And then all of a sudden, New York Community, the stock just got whacked because of multifamily, heavy reserves, charge-offs, no rent increase, and it's just something we got to be aware of, I think.
Absolutely.
It's all getting painted with a weird paintbrush at the moment.
Maybe see if you can do it outside of Los Angeles or California, because there's too much government oversight, too many regulations. Our city government steps in with no eviction policies, no rent increases, rent control, vacancy decontrol. You name it, they're
and then we
putting
keep
it
voting
on.
the same people in,
Interesting.
right? So the challenge
Vegas is looking good. Arizona, Phoenix is
Right.
looking
The
good.
challenge
except
is
for-
dealing with rent control markets.
Yes.
That's
but
the
part of the
challenge.
challenge is then you go and you talk about Arizona, and I was always fortunate enough to get into Phoenix metro area, Maricopa County early, and then say, I think we've done enough, let's get out, because every 10 years,
Early in, early out.
well, yeah, I mean, Arizona goes bankrupt every once in a while, and so does Nevada. So it's, anywhere that you've got too much land, like now you look at listings of homes in Paradise Valley, residential homes, and all of a sudden there's homes listed for $80 million. And this is Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, where there's no shortage of land, and you can always build another neighborhood, plop in a lake, and call it a new city.
And you can't live there for 3 or 4 months of the year.
Right.
It's too
Right,
hard.
but the difference today in Phoenix is population growth. Population growth,
Off the charts.
when you're talking about the 10 years of boom bust, Arizona and Phoenix did not lead the nation in population growth. But today it does. All right, the top 3 markets, right? When we think about in the western region of population growth is Austin, Texas, Phoenix, Arizona, Salt Lake City, Utah. Those are probably the 3 best population growth, job growth markets. All 3 are challenged with supply today. All 3 of them. So what's the answer? Do you go and do business in the highly legislative, restrictive, supply-constrained markets of Los Angeles? Or do you go out and venture into the red states? And what we're finding is it's about geographic diversification, because there is no one perfect answer. We love Orange County. We love most parts of San Diego County. We love Ventura County. There's no rent control there. You could be subject to statewide rent control, but statewide rent control is something that seems still to be able to be something to deal with, notwithstanding that there are some legislative challenges now dealing with that too, with the challenge to Costa-Hawkins. But we do like going into these redder states, and that's where the vision of our company is, notwithstanding the supply, because we see that that's going to burn off. Today, if you want to get a construction loan in Phoenix or Austin or Salt Lake City, you're just not getting one. And so they're not building. And so the massive building that has created this oversupply is slowing down. There's not really new projects. Yeah, they'll finish out what's being built now in 2024. But if you're looking at 2026 and 2027, those markets will still continue to have job growth. Those markets will still continue to have population growth, and that supply will be eaten up, and then you'll get back to your rent growth. So again, it always comes down to the same story, which is, did you come in over levered or did you not? Are you properly levered? Can you wait it out? Do you have patient capital that will see it through? Then if you can, then you can be successful in these non-legislative states. But and that's why we're staying away from reinvesting in what we'll call rent-controlled markets, where, still a large part, probably the bulk of our portfolio is still in rent-controlled markets. And it doesn't mean we never would buy in rent-controlled markets, but we're buying new product in rent-controlled markets. That we like that play because, like San Diego, I just said we bought a new building. That building that we bought won't be subject to statewide rent control for 14 years. Wouldn't surprise me if you read one day that I sold that building before the end of those 14 years. And so we're staying, so we like dancing around in different geographies for different plays, but to stay out of the heavily legislative older properties, that's the hard play today.
And some of this is pure math, right? You've got a building that you bought when rates were at 3%, and you've got rent control, and then all of a sudden rates are at, financing is at 6%, and you're rolling off at some point a fixed rate period, and the rents didn't keep up. Right?
And don't forget, you have the earthquake retrofit soft story that you have to have completed by 2028 or whatever that is.
Just in time for when that rate goes from fixed to floating.
Yes.
Right, and now you got a gun in your head.
Yeah, buying old real estate that is subject to rent control is a tough play. today.
which used to
And
be
Value add was
The
the,
way to
play.
go.
Value
Exactly.
was the play.
right. So a lot's changing, and and from a bank perspective, you're looking. Everyone's talking about that cliff. That cliff of when it goes from fixed to floating, and is the cash flow there to be able to support the refinancing of the loan, or is someone going to have to come to the table with a lot of equity in order to make it pencil?
And your IO is also burned off.
Yes. Yes.
It's interesting. Michael and I only see the deals when due diligence is cleared and there's binding contract. In any case, you of course see hundreds of deals. Probably, I can only imagine how many deals each of you is presented with every single day. If you told me it was 100, I wouldn't be the least bit shocked. But all of a sudden, Salt Lake City. I mean, I had never seen any deals in Salt Lake City. Now we're looking at deals. We're structuring deals in Salt Lake City. Always a lot of Phoenix and always a lot of Austin. But Salt Lake City must be the one of the coming places to invest.
But a hard market to break into.
Yeah, we've completed several projects, multifamily in Salt Lake City, and we have one under construction now.
So, office space, another favorite topic. Nadine, when you see the future of office space evolving post-pandemic, especially regarding leasing, occupancy, the renewal, so I view those as the economics, and with the shift towards remote work, how do you review, or how do you view return to office, and if everyone is working from home versus in the office, how do you maintain some sort of a work culture, whatever, an office culture, whatever that is meant to look like in the future?
Well, for sure, there's been a recalibration, right? Since prior to COVID, everybody had to go to the office every day, and you had to have, your 250 square feet of workspace and your frame on the desk and your home away from home, right? You don't have that. You don't have that anymore, unfortunately. You have it in the high-end trophy markets, right? There's a flight to quality happening that they're saying Century City is one of the hottest office markets in the country. You should all please come and rent from me in Century City. There's been a demand for not WeWork, but a higher end type of office. We have Industrious in our building, and we just executed another lease with Industrious in a profit participation lease as opposed to a straight market deal. But we think that will be a great asset to have, because if you want flexibility, which is what everybody seems to want these days, you'll go to Industrious. And you can rent one office, you can rent it on a month to month, you can rent 20 offices on a month to month. So you have that flexibility. I personally love going to work every day. I have way too much happening at my house. I can't concentrate. During COVID, I had 2 kids, the dog, the neighbors doing construction, my husband at home. I mean, it was just way too much. So I went into the office every day, and really, I've created a culture at the office where people want to be there, right? They want to be under my nose, so I see that they're working, so they get promotions, they get raises, I feed them. They all want to be fed at least, every couple weeks, bring in lunch. They're all in the office.
100%.
100%. And you have to amenitize your office. You have to have things that they're interested in. You have to have events. You have to have food. You have to have, of course, standard Wi-Fi and great culture. But also, one of the things that I think is missing in work from home is celebration, right? So when something happens, we celebrate it. When someone has a baby, someone gets married, when you close a deal, when you any of those kinds of things, you have celebrations. And I think that's one of the things that creates office culture.
Or how about the day that person just showed up and got hired?
Yes, exactly. You want them there. You want to celebrate that. You want to bring everybody back. I do have one accountant who works from home, I should say, but they're not involved in the culture, right? And they're not going to get promoted. They're not going to get mentored. They're not going to get, the benefits of a family. And so, I truly believe that there will be a return to office. All the bigs, JP Morgan, all the tech people, they thought they were going to be 100% remote. They're all calling their people back to work. So it is just a matter of time. It is momentum. And I firmly believe people, just because of concentration and other outside forces, will come back to work eventually.
I think some of it is generational.
Yeah.
Fortunately, my daughters, they're 28 and 31, and they both worked in offices pre-COVID. So they knew what that experience was, what it looked like, felt like, and the benefits of being in the office. Then COVID hit and everyone went home. The new kid that starts only knows what it is to work from home.
Right.
And that picture that they have in their mind is all they know. The idea that, like, the older one works at Netflix, the younger one works at TikTok, and they've gone back to 4 days a week in the office. I don't
That's
know.
the recalibration.
I don't know
It's
why
going to be
not
hybrid.
5.
It's going to be hybrid. It's
But
going to be
it's 4.
3 or 4.
Right.
And then getting that hour or 2 back a day in your life of not commuting, even if it's 1 or 2 days a week, that's transformational, truly. So I think, bosses and companies do have to be more flexible.
Is it hybrid at your office?
If they needed it, yes. Someone who
But,
was on
but-
maternity leave,
But you have to ask for it.
Yeah, you have to ask.
Okay, so our office is different. We are, everybody in our office, in our corporate office, right? Everyone is working in a community. They're all at the properties, right? You can't lease a space.
Right.
You can't maintain a space if you're not at the property. So what we call the majority of our company, more than 300 employees, they're of course all working at the communities. Our corporate office, we require everyone to come to the office, but for everyone, or almost everyone, it's a hybrid schedule. So it's a minimum of 3 times a week. Most people are at 4 times a week. What I find really funny is that, of course, the 1 day a week or 2 days a week that people don't work, it's either a Friday or a Monday. And it makes me personally crazy. I'm there 5 days a week.
I've heard you completely stay out of that.
Oh, that's the one thing that I call out. I'll sometimes ask for a staff meeting, on a Friday, and people are like, and cameras on,
just
right?
me.
Cameras
That's
on.
just me.
And that's what my COO tells me, right? And I listen to him, and so I behave. But I do think that part of the world is a good change. It's a good culture change, where people can have a doctor's appointment one day, and they're commuting from Torrance, or other difficult, hour or more commutes to our corporate office, which is a Miracle Mile, and allow them to work from home on those days. And they schedule their appointments on Fridays or Mondays and so forth. But so I see that as positive. I think it's challenging for an office landlord. Thank God we are basically not office landlords anymore. We're down to 1 office building where it's where our corporate headquarters is.
I think it's
We saw
also
that vision
challenging for us
pre-COVID.
control freaks.
Huh?
I think it's also challenging for us CEO control freaks.
Look,
We've got technology now where somebody's working from home.
But
and
we wanna
can figure out they're only really working 10
here's
hours
what
a
it comes
week.
down to. This is what my COO taught me. It comes down to you want acquiring the best talent. If you want to acquire the best talent, then you got to figure out where they work from best. And if you want to give up talent so that you can sit there and micromanage them all day, then you're giving up that talent. We're not doing that. We're hiring the best talent. And if ultimately that means they're going to be 3 days a week in the office and 2 days at home, we'll take that on. And we've done that. And also it depends on the department. IT, certain departments, it's just more natural to work more from home than from in the office. And we need to embrace it. And that's part of being a leader in a company, is you need to embrace what the world is. And I'm embracing it, as hard as it is for me. And they know it.
That sounds
but
really good.
I'm embracing it. They're all laughing probably, saying, I can't believe he's saying
No,
that.
it sounds
But
really
it's true.
good, but I only got rid of my BlackBerry. When did I get rid of it, Jim?
Oh, I lied.
2 years ago?
I thought
2 years
last
ago,
week.
3 years ago? Right, so the idea, I'm very visual. Like, I'll remember something because I saw someone walk by in the office. And now I want to talk to them. I want to go over something, whatever. If I've got something major that needs to be worked on, I'm giving it to the person who's in the office, who's there, who I see is really working hard and they're a rock star. I'm not going to remember who it is that's working from home. And now all of a sudden there are lawsuits where the person is saying, well, I'm being disadvantaged because I'm working from home. I'm not getting the best opportunities. I'm not getting the best work handed to me. And that to me, and maybe that's the Socialist Republic of California, employment law, I don't know, but that's some of what we struggle with.
So
Well, you're
Michael
missing
and I,
instant feedback also.
Yes.
Right? If
Yes.
you're not in the office, you don't get that instant feedback.
That's right.
so Michael's office is next door to my office. My office is next door to Michael's office, and I am not a proponent of work from home. For lawyers, I think young lawyers need to be in the office and see what we do, and that's how they learn. They learn from everybody. But there's hardly a day that goes by that I don't pop into Michael's office a couple times. He doesn't pop into my office and ask an arcane question about some deal that we're working on that will
Some lot deal, probably.
will probably never
Can't talk about
be looked at by an auditor. But from our perspective, given what we do, we want to make sure that everything is as tightly constructed as it could possibly be, and it's just easier. I mean, it isn't to say that I can't call Michael on his cell or he called me on my cell, but it's just easier to have that human contact, and it's not the answer is A. Invariably, it's there's this consideration and that consideration, and it's nice to talk to the people face to face.
It's also visual. I mean, we'll draw stuff on the whiteboard.
Oh yeah.
One thing I like doing is pulling out the hard copy of the books of the Internal Revenue Code and Treasury regulations and looking at the actual text. And even while it's great that we have access to all these resources and stuff online, there is still something that you get from just flipping through a book and seeing, oh, there's this heading, there's this thing that I just hadn't thought about.
And I think it's very telling when Zoom tells its employees to come back to the office. It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Okay, so Skip and Michael, can you share specific examples of how you've utilized 1031 exchanges for your clients and some of the more interesting complex deals you've advised on?
So a lot of what we do is separate partners or family members in large transactions, and we're blessed to have a client base that has been successful, and it's not unusual for the deferred gain that we're looking at to be in the tens of millions, and nobody wants to pay. I always say there may be people out there who want to pay their taxes. They just don't find their way to Michael's or my office. And all of our clients are very tax sensitive. So we know that the Franchise Tax Board is very active in auditing 1031 exchanges. Not so much the IRS. I mean, I get an occasional IRS audit, usually 35,000 feet. And one of the issues is that you've got 6 family members sometimes from different generations. You've got 6 partners. I mean, if it sounds like your transaction, this is a transaction we work on constantly for different clients, and we separate them using what we call the division rules, where we create from the original partnership, multiple partnerships. And I'm going to say this, but nobody understands it the first time they hear it, and I didn't understand it the first time I heard it. I had to read it 3 times. Each new partnership is owned by partners who have a different percentage than they had in the original partnership, but collectively they own more than 50% of the profits and capital in the old partnership. And there's hardly a week that goes by that we're not doing one of these transactions, and 5 people go off, they do their separate exchanges, everybody's happy. Knock on wood, we've been audited, I don't know, a dozen or more times by the Franchise Tax Board in these transactions, and we've never had a problem. They've all been no changes. One of the other issues that comes up is that clients always want to refinance post-closing, notwithstanding higher interest rates. And once again, the Franchise Tax Board takes a view that if you close on Monday and you refinance on Tuesday, the refinancing proceeds really are an end run around getting the cash that you're supposed to invest in the new property. No authority for it for the Franchise Tax Board, but we always caution clients to include some speed bumps. And a speed bump is something that slows you down, but doesn't keep you from going forward. And it's easy to navigate, so that if the loan also includes like $1 million of rehab, include a few requirements, minimal requirements that you have to do the improvements, you got to present an invoice, those kinds of things. There have also been some interesting. State of California has adopted something called the Office of Tax Appeals that hears disputes with the Franchise Tax Board, and these cases come out periodically involving 1031 exchanges. There was one case where the 45-day designation was delivered. It could have been delivered either to the escrow company, which I always get them confused with Chicago Title, or the accommodator, whose three initials I'm not going to mention. And they didn't, and instead, the 45-day designation was delivered to the parent of Chicago Title, which I believe is Fidelity, and the Office of Tax Appeals said that wasn't good. I mean, I assume that everybody here knows that you want to get a confirmation from your accommodator that, yes, I received your designation. There's also a situation where somebody was selling 4 properties at the same time, different closings, but all within a month or so. They used a single exchange file and then sent 5 replacement property designations, and the 5 replacement properties exceeded the 200% rule, and they were trying to prove that they said that they were only going to acquire 2 of the properties, so therefore they were within the 3 property rule. The Office of Tax Appeals turned them down, and I think rightfully so. And all the bottom line is that the rules are pretty black and white, and you ought to follow them. And Michael, of course, has some other examples that he wants to share with us about interesting 1031 exchange issues.
So I would add first, for people who are, in the context of partnerships that do split up and do go their separate ways, it is extremely important to address these issues when you're negotiating the partnership agreement at the outset. It will give you a wider range of options and will also allow you to document things in a way that, if you are audited, will give you a better chance of success on audit based on different case law and different rulings. So some of the other interesting things we've seen is that last year, and this is, I guess, relevant for all economic times, but especially now, we had a transaction where the replacement property was actually a deed in lieu of foreclosure. And we were able to structure that in a way that complied with the 1031 rules, so that the taxpayer could essentially acquire this building via deed in lieu of foreclosure as their replacement property. That's done using what's called a reverse exchange structure, where I will not bore anyone with the details, but I'm happy to talk about them if you want. And then one thing I was mentioning earlier is that 1031 does not exist in a vacuum. It interacts with other provisions of the Internal Revenue Code and other tax rules in ways that are really important to understand and be mindful of. Because if you're not, you can have a situation, like I said, where you have a perfectly structured exchange with a zero boot, but you will still wind up having either taxable income or some other negative tax consequence. Probably the most prevalent example of that is, and also relevant now, has to do with bonus depreciation, which, for 2023 was at 80%, for 2024 is now at 60%. And there's legislation that passed the House of Representatives that will put it back to 100% for 2023 and 2024. So as I was discussing before the panel with someone, it probably makes sense to not file your tax returns until you know whether bonus depreciation goes back to 100%. And hopefully we'll know that sooner rather than later. But the thing is that what bonus depreciation and cost segregation studies do is they reclassify a portion of your building, a portion of your real property, as personal property, as not real property. It's called in the tax world, Section 1245 property. And that's really great because this Section 1245 property is generally depreciated over a much faster schedule and is also eligible for bonus depreciation. The thing is that when you're doing a 1031 exchange, you are still subject to what's called the 1245 depreciation recapture rules, which essentially means that you need to, in your upleg property, buy 1245 property with the same value or greater as the quote unquote Section 1245 property that you sold. So if you have a building that you bought for, $1 million and you do a cost segregation study and they say, okay, we can reclassify $300,000 of that as this, quote unquote Section 1245 property. And let's just say, obviously, you can, sort of, rely on the fact that these assets do actually lose value sooner and more quickly so that they have a lower value at the time you sell it. But let's say at the time you sell it, let's just say for argument's sake, it's $300,000. And you exchange into raw land. And you buy it for $1 million and you're good, no boot. Well, you're still gonna have $300,000 of this Section 1245 recapture, which is then taxed at ordinary income. So that's extremely important to be mindful of. There was a tax court case towards the middle end of last year that illustrated this. It took place prior to 2018 when you could still exchange when you could still exchange non-real estate. And let me just say one other quick thing about this is that even though this stuff is characterized as quote unquote personal property or Section 1245 property for depreciation purposes, it still counts as real property for purposes of 1031 exchanges. So it can be exchanged, but it's something that needs to be accounted for. The other situation where you wind up seeing it is when people bring significant amounts of fresh money into an entity that is doing an exchange, especially if that amount of fresh money is going to go to satisfy your debt replacement requirement. As I think a lot of people in the room know, you can satisfy your debt replacement requirement in an exchange either with debt, or you can bring in fresh cash. But if you are in a tax partnership, the rules are different. This would not apply in the case of a corporation that's doing an exchange, or in the case of an individual or trust that's doing an exchange. If you are in a tax partnership and you bring in other members, there are issues to consider that can potentially result in either gain over time to the legacy partners, or the new partners who come in will not get as much depreciation and will not have as much basis as they think they're going to have. And these things are often in more syndicated deals are dictated but need to be disclosed. In deals with fewer parties, they're negotiated pretty heavily. So those are two things that I think are really important to be aware of in the broader context of 1031 as it exists within the tax rules.
Thank you. All right, so we're getting down to the short strokes here, so I'm going to kind of jam a few questions into each other. All right, so while we think about our businesses as being real estate businesses, you actually all run multi-generational, family-built and run real estate companies. What are the biggest advantages and what are the biggest challenges of running those family-run businesses? And I'm going to combine that with what considerations do you all keep in mind when planning for family succession, management, talent, tax and estate planning? You might have these lawyers involved.
So-
What do you got?
So I'll just share. Look, the advantage and disadvantage of running a family business, they're both one and the same in that you have if you're running a family business, right? These are the people you love. These are the people that know you best. These are the people you get along with conceptually. And so if they're in your corner and you're in everyone's corner, then and they're all buying into, I'll call it the global business theme of what you're doing, then the hardest thing in any business is raising the equity. That's the hardest thing. It's not finding the financing. It's not finding the property. It's really raising the equity. It's always the biggest challenge. So if you're in a family business and the family's all in, well, the first 25 to 50% of our deals, I got the family. I got the family there. So right when you meet an investor, what's the first thing the investor's thinking? How much are you putting in the deal, right? So if I'm putting in less than 10%, they're viewing me in a different light than if I and my family are putting in 25 to 50%, which is what we do in every deal. So that's the advantage. The disadvantage, of course, is families have politics. It's hard to manage a family business. If you ask me, do I spend more time managing my family or managing my investors that are outside? It's not even close to how much more time I manage my family to make sure that they're always on board. Literally, so it was different than when my father ran the show, right? When the patriarch is running the show. I'm sure when Ray Watt was around, right? It was a kingdom of one. And when my father ran the show, it was a kingdom of one together with my mom. But now what we've done, and I did this already with my father, and I forced him to saying, we need to deal with the world before, God forbid, you're no longer around. So 10 years before my father passed, almost more than 10 years, we met with a well-known lawyer. I'm going to say his name because he really did a great job for us, Seymour Fagan. And Seymour Fagan gave us guidance on how to deal with succession, how we will make decisions, and we govern the family business as if my parents were no longer in the room. And so we had practice, and things came up, and we got input from my father, where I would be right or be wrong. My father had a famous line, if you have a choice between being kind or being right, pick being kind. I probably needed to hear that from him. And that was helpful to hear that. And so that's how we've managed it in this, what is a disadvantage in that when you have a family business, people have a seat at the table. They're entitled more than what a typical investor would be. And you have to manage it. And that's my guidance to everyone is that it works for us because I put the time in to make it work. And I foresaw the issues and planned for them ahead of time. And that's the advantage and the disadvantage. Let everyone else share.
And then when it doesn't work, you hire Skip and Michael, and they help you in a tax-efficient manner reorganize.
They've said it all.
So that book ended it very, very well. Sean, anything to add to that?
No,
They
very
covered it?
complete, yes.
That's funny. Okay, so I want to end it with, I got really two left. Okay, one. So whether it was in all my investment banking years or banking years, if I look at the industry, it's always been a business dominated by men at the highest levels, in the boardroom, men driving those businesses. But we've got some pretty powerful women in business and some pretty powerful women in this industry. And we've got some of them sitting in this room, and I don't want to discount anybody. And Nadine, you're a phenomenal example, of somebody who chose to do what you're doing now. You wanted to do something entirely different, and then you chose to do this, and you've lived up to your expectations. I'm sure your grandfather, his expectations, and but most importantly yours. And then I always think, I did a panel where we did a fireside chat. Janet, you and I, you and me, you and I.
Us.
You and I, we did a panel. And I'm haunted by my father, who always corrected me on that. And I did a panel. You're a very impressive, executive in doing what you do. And very strong and powerful and a great leader and mentor. And Angelica, I'm sure you feel the same way about her. So how do we break down that barrier? How do we mentor? How do we encourage more? How do we find that talent? How does this business, and I'm sure there are probably a lot of men that would love this business to just be men, right? But how do we?
Those are just the ones who are leaving.
Right. Yeah, they're already starting to walk out. No, but I think there's, I think that I was recently told, I've always said that in my career I've been gender neutral in my approach to hiring talent, and I've been blind to race. I just hire best talent. And then somebody told me recently, in this new era that we're in, that just means I'm insensitive. Right. So how do we find that best talent, and how do we have that growth and expansion within our industry?
Well, we have David's mom in the room, who is an icon and a force. And we got my girl crush, not my bromance, my girl crush, Joan Kessler, over there. So, I think that it is hard. And certainly when I was coming up over 25 years ago, there were not a lot of women in the room. And we're working on it, right? I strive every day to mentor young women. I speak at USC all the time, and at the Price School and the Lusk and the Marshall School, and I try and pluck great talent and mentor them. And men call me all the time. I mean, more men call me than women to mentor them and to talk to them. But when a woman calls, I make a special effort. Please come in, talk to me. Meet my team. 5 out of 7 of my top C-suite are women. I specifically make an effort to hire women. I also make an effort to be flexible, right? I mean, 20 years ago, when a woman wanted maternity leave and she wanted to come, take your time, and then take 3 days, come in 3 days and take 2 days off, and have some flexibility in your schedule, or work in the morning and take the afternoon off so you can go to the soccer game or go to the play or go to your kids' parent-teacher conference. I think that generationally, people understand that women do need a little bit more flexibility to play that role of both employee, CEO, wife, mother, everything, play date, teacher, whatever, they have to be able. So I just think the more flexibility you offer and the more mentorship you offer, you're going to get the talent to come to you.
Janet, do you want to add anything? And I'd also offer that up to Jenny. Jenny Simmons is my right-hand president and chief operating officer at the bank. And I don't know a lot of bank presidents and chief operating officers who are women, in the banking industry. So, and I always refer to her as a Sandler guy. And
Kelly.
And that was Sandler O'Neill, which was my investment banking firm that spun out of Bear Stearns. And all my mentors died on 9/11. So, and I chose Jenny, to run most of the firm. And I told her that I'm not doing this forever. I'm not doing it in my 70s. I've done it in my 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s.
Not so bad in your 70s.
You're not a woman. but
That is true.
Janet, do you have thoughts you want to add to this?
I started in real estate 38 years ago. So there were literally no women. There was just a handful of us. But I always fell back on what my father said. You could do what a man could do, but even better. So having said that, it's getting easier, but again, you have to prove yourself more than a male to be able to survive in this industry. But people are coming along. You know, it's completely different than 38 years ago when I started. There were no women. In fact, Nadine, you and I were on Chamber of Commerce, Century City. We both got awards on
Yeah.
that. Can we get a cafe in our building, please?
Working on it.
Please, we need somewhere to go eat.
Someone you're gonna love. Too.
Yeah. So it's been a ride for me, but I loved every step of the way, really. So I'm humbled and honored to be able to survive this industry, really. Yeah.
I thought the entertainment industry was cutthroat.
Oh no.
Anyway.
No. But I have a question from the You guys didn't discuss anything about ULA. Want to know your thoughts on ULA. It's big challenge. You know, I want to know what your thoughts are. Is there any way people are fighting ULA? It's just, you know, everything we do in Los Angeles County, of course.
So there is a
It's-
ballot measure fighting
Yes,
it, the
yes.
Taxpayer Protection
Yeah.
Act. And everybody vote for that. That's coming up in November. And just if you're not familiar with that, it's going to ultimately reverse ULA and be a force to stop the taxation, the additional taxation that we have here in the state of California. It's going to require a 2/3 majority vote. ULA got through just by the, I think it was 52-48.
They didn't know what it really was.
People really,
58%.
huh?
It was
They didn't know what
58.
it was.
Huh?
It was 58. It
Okay,
was
but
less than-
nowhere
way less than
near,
2/3. Way
nowhere
less than
near
2/3.
2/3, and so it potentially can be reversed if we all see through the Taxpayer Protection Act. There's other ballot measures that are being fought as well, like we were talking about all this legislation in rent control cities. There's another new ballot measure that's going to make potentially legislation that much harder that Michael Weinstein is trying to get through. Another challenge to Costa-Hawkins and the protections of vacancy decontrol and the protections to make sure it's only affecting real estate that's, older real estate, 1979 or older. And now there's another ballot measure that's being sponsored by the California Apartment Association. And that is to stop Michael Weinstein and others who would follow with him to using nonprofits. In his case, he's using the AIDS Healthcare Foundation and allowing him to use, up to a certain percentage, I think it's 10% or approximately that number, for discretionary use. And that's how he's funding these difficult anti-landlord, anti-real estate legislations, and we need to see those through, and that's the answer. So the answer is we all got to come and vote in November for the right ballot measures, and see if that can be a reverse to stop this from happening.
So when you're talking about reverse, that means the people who, let's say it passes, I hope, the people who have already sold their property, they get their taxes.
They don't
reversed?
get their money
No
back.
clawback.
No clawback. It'll just be on a go-forward
It's
basis.
for, yeah, they have 12 months to pass it again with a 2/3 majority, and if not, then it gets.
But we think it has a good chance or I personally think it's a good chance because
Of being
it's not about real estate. It's about, takes a 2/3 vote to any additional tax, period. All kinds of tax, from sales tax to any other tax. And I think that resonates with people. We are the most taxed state in the country. I think we're at number one. Maybe New Jersey's right there with us.
Which is why they're moving to Arizona and everywhere
And that's why
else.
they're moving to Florida. You know, we got to move to Cabo, but whatever it's going to be. So that's the answer. People are fed up, and maybe there's a chance.
And Beulah's been a disaster for the real estate industry, but also for the city of Los Angeles. They raised like, what, 25% of what they thought. And they're, hundreds of millions of dollars otherwise allocated for homelessness. I mean, it's the worst tax I've ever seen in my career. It makes 0 sense, and it's been counterproductive in every way.
Any other questions? Shaheen, how are you? Good. Any other questions, or we call it a day?
All right.
All right, thank you,
Thanks
everybody.
for staying.